Chapter 17. The Book of Praying for Rain. Istisqa. Chapter 1. When should the Imam pray for rain? It was narrated that Anas bin Malik said, a man came to the Messenger of Allah and said, O Messenger of Allah, the livestock have died and the routes have been cut off. Pray to Allah, SVT, the Mighty and Sublime. So the Messenger of Allah prayed to Allah, SVT, and it rained from that Friday until the next. Then a man came to the Messenger of Allah and said, the houses have been destroyed, the routes have been cut off, and the livestock have died. He said, O Allah, on the tops of the mountains and hills, in the bottom of the valleys, and where the trees grow, so the rain was lifted from Al-Madinah like a garment being removed. Great Sahih. Chapter 2. The Imam going out to the prayer place to pray for rain. It was narrated from Abbad bin Tamim. Sufyan said, I asked Abdullah bin Abi Bakr, who said, I heard it from Abbad bin Tamim, who narrated it from his father, that Abdullah bin Zayd, who was shown the call to prayer in a dream, said, the Messenger of Allah went out to the prayer place to pray for rain. He faced the Qibla and turned his cloak around and prayed 2 rakahs. Great Sahih. Chapter 3. The recommended condition for the Imam to be in if he goes out. It was narrated from Hisham bin Ishaq bin Abdullah bin Kinana that his father said, so and so sent me to ask him how the Messenger of Allah prayed for rain, Istisqa. He said, the Messenger of Allah went out, beseeching and humble, dressed in a state of humility. He did not give a khutbah like this khutbah of yours. And he prayed 2 rakahs. Great Hassan. It was narrated from Abdullah bin Zayd that the Messenger of Allah prayed for rain wearing a black kamisa. Great Sahih. Chapter 4. The Imam sitting on the minbar to pray for rain. It was narrated from Hisham bin Ishaq bin Abdullah bin Kinana that his father said, I asked Ibn Abbas how the Messenger of Allah prayed for rain. He said, the Messenger of Allah went out dressed in a state of humility, beseeching and humble. He sat on the minbar, but he did not deliver a khutbah like this khutbah of yours. Rather he kept supplicating, beseeching and saying the takbir, and he prayed 2 rakahs, as he used to do during the 2 Eids. Great Hassan. Chapter 5. The Imam turning his back to the people when supplicating during prayers for rain. It was narrated from Abbad bin Tamim that his paternal uncle had told him that he went out with the Messenger of Allah to pray for rain. He turned his rida around and turned his back to the people. Then he prayed 2 rakahs and recited loudly. Great Sahih. Chapter 6. The Imam turning his rida around when praying for rain. It was narrated from Abbad bin Tamim, from his paternal uncle, that the Prophet prayed for rain and prayed 2 rakahs and turned his rida around. Great Sahih. Chapter 7. When should the Imam turn his rida around? It was narrated from Abdullah bin Abi Bakr that he heard Abbad bin Tamim said, the Messenger of Allah went out and prayed for rain, and he turned his rida around when he turned to the Qibla. Great Sahih. Chapter 8. The Imam raising his hands. It was narrated from Abbad bin Tamim from his paternal uncle that he saw the Messenger of Allah when he prayed for rain, turn to face the Qibla, turning his cloak around and raising his hands. Great Sahih. Chapter 9. How to raise the hands. It was narrated that Anas said, the Messenger of Allah did not raise his hands during any supplication except when praying for rain, when he used to raise his hands so high that the whiteness of his armpits could be seen. Great Sahih. It was narrated from Abi al-Lam that he saw the Messenger of Allah at Ajar as-Sayt praying for rain and raising his hands, making supplications. Great Sahih. It was narrated from Anas bin Malik that he said, while we were in the Masjid on Friday and the Messenger of Allah was addressing the people, a man stood up and said, O Messenger of Allah, the routes have been cut off, our wealth has been destroyed and prices have gone up. Pray to Allah SVT to give us rain. So the Messenger of Allah raised his hands in level with his face and said, O Allah, give us rain. By Allah SVT, the Messenger of Allah had not come down from the minbar before it started to pour with rain, and it rained from that day until the following Friday. Then a man stood up. I do not know if he was the same man who had asked the Messenger of Allah to pray for rain for us or not, and said, O Messenger of Allah, the routes have been cut off and our wealth has been destroyed because there is too much water. Pray to Allah SVT to stop the rain for us. The Messenger of Allah said, O Allah, around us and not on us, rather on the mountains and places where trees grow. By Allah, hardly had the Messenger of Allah spoken these words, and then the clouds split apart and vanished, until we could not see anything of them. Great Sahih. Chapter 10. The Supplication. It was narrated from Anas bin Malik that the Prophet said, Allahumma skina, O Allah, give us rain. Great Sahih. It was narrated from Thabit that Anas said, the Prophet was delivering the khutbah one Friday when the people stood up and shouted, O Prophet of Allah, there has been no rain and the animals have died. Pray to Allah SVT to send us rain. He said, O Allah, send us rain. O Allah, send us rain. By Allah SVT, we could not see even a wisp of a cloud in the sky. Then a cloud appeared and grew, and it rained. The Messenger of Allah came down and prayed, and the people departed, and it continued to rain until the following Friday. When the Messenger of Allah stood up to deliver the khutbah, they called out to him and said, O Prophet of Allah, the houses are destroyed and the routes are cut off. Pray to Allah to take it away from us. The Messenger of Allah smiled and said, O Allah, around us and not on us. There then is dispersed from Al-Madinah, and rain fell around Al-Madinah, but not a single drop fell on Al-Madinah. I looked, and it was in something like a ring. Great Sahih. It was narrated from Anas bin Malik that a man entered the Masjid when the Messenger of Allah was standing and delivering the khutbah. He turned to face the Messenger of Allah standing and said, O Messenger of Allah, our wealth has been destroyed and the routes have been cut off. Pray to Allah SVT to send us rain. The Messenger of Allah raised his hands then said, O Allah, send us rain. Anas said, By Allah, we had not seen even a wisp of a cloud in the sky, and there were no houses or buildings between us and the mountain of Sal. Then a cloud like a shield appeared, and when it reached the middle of the sky, it spread and it began to rain. Anas said, "By Allah, we did not see the sun for a week." Then a man entered through that door on the following Friday, when the Messenger of Allah was standing and delivering the khutbah. He turned to face him, standing, and said, "O Messenger of Allah, may Allah SWT send blessings upon you. Our wealth has been destroyed and the routes have been cut off. Pray to Allah SWT to withhold the rain from us." The Messenger of Allah raised his hands and said, "O Allah, around us and not on us. O Allah, on the hills and mountains, the bottoms of the valleys, and where the trees grow." Then it stopped raining, and we went out walking in the sun. Sharik said, "I asked Anas, was he the same man?" He said, "No." Great Sahih. Chapter 11. Prayer after the supplication. It was narrated that Ibn Shihab said, "Abad bin Tamim told me that he heard his paternal uncle, who was one of the companions of the Messenger of Allah, say, the Messenger of Allah went out one day to pray for rain. He turned his back toward the people, praying to Allah SWT. And he turned to face the Qibla. He turned his rida around, then he prayed 2 rakahs. One of the narrators, Ibn Abi Dib, said in the hadith, and he recited in them both. Great Sahih. Chapter 12. How many rakahs are there in the prayer for rain? Salat al-Istisqa. It was narrated from Abdullah bin Zayd that the Prophet went out to pray for rain, and he prayed 2 rakahs facing the Qibla. Sahih. Chapter 13. How is the prayer for rain performed? It was narrated from Hisham bin Ishaq bin Abdullah bin Kinana that his father said, "One of the governors sent me to Ibn Abbas to ask him about the prayer for rain. He said, 'What kept him from asking me?' The Messenger of Allah went out humbly, dressed in a state of humility, submissiveness, and beseeching, and he prayed 2 rakahs as in the Eid prayer, but he did not deliver a khutbah like this khutbah of yours." Great Hassan. Chapter 14. Reciting Quran loudly for the prayer for rain. It was narrated from Abad bin Tamim from his paternal uncle that the Prophet went out and prayed for rain. Then he prayed 2 rakahs in which he recited loudly. Great Sahih. Chapter 15. What to say when it rains. It was narrated from Aisha that when it rained, the Messenger of Allah would say, "Allahumma alhu Saiban Nafiya." O Allah, make it beneficial rain. Great Sahih. Chapter 16. It is makruh to attribute rain to the stars. It was narrated that Abu Huraira said, the Messenger of Allah said, Allah the Mighty and Sublime said, "I have never sent down my favor to my slaves, but a group of them became disbelievers who say, 'The stars and by stars.'" Great Sahih. It was narrated that Zayd bin Khalid al-Juhani said, "It rained during the time of the Prophet, and he said, 'Have you not heard what your Lord said this night?' He said, 'I have never sent down any blessing upon my slaves, but some of them become disbelievers thereby, saying, we have been given rain by such and such a star. As for the one who believes in me and praises me for giving rain, that is the one who believes in me and disbelieves in me and disbelieves in the stars. But the one who says, we have been given rain by such and such a star, he has disbelieved in me and believed in the stars. Grade Sahih. It was narrated that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said, the Messenger of Allah said, if Allah SVT were to withhold rain from his slaves for 5 years and then send it, some of the people would become disbelievers, saying, we have been given rain by the star of Al-Mijdah. Grade Daif. Chapter 17. Imam asking for rain to be stopped if he fears that it may cause harm. It was narrated that Anas said, there was no rain for a year, so some of the Muslims went to the Prophet one Friday and said, O Messenger of Allah, there has been no rain, the land has become bare, and our wealth has been destroyed. He raised his hands, and we did not see any cloud in the sky. He stretched forth his hands until I could see the whiteness of his armpits, praying to Allah SVT for rain. When we finished praying Jummah, even a young man whose house nearby was worried about how he would get home. That lasted for a week. Then on the following Friday they said, O Messenger of Allah, houses have been destroyed and all travel has been ceased. The Messenger of Allah smiled at how quickly the sons of Adam became weary, and he said with his hands raised, O Allah, around us and not on us, and it dispersed from Al-Madinah. Grade Sahih. Chapter 18. Imam raising his hands when asking for rain to stop. It was narrated that Anas bin Malik said, there was a drought during the time of the Messenger of Allah. While the Messenger of Allah was giving the khutbah on the minbar one Friday, a Bedouin stood up and said, O Messenger of Allah, wealth has been destroyed and our children are hungry. Pray to Allah for us. The Messenger of Allah raised his hands, and we could not see even a wisp of a cloud in the sky, but by the one in whose hand is my soul, he did not lower his hands before clouds like mountains appeared, and he did not come down from his minbar before we saw the rain dripping from his beard. It rained that day, and the next day, and the day after, until the following Friday. Then that Bedouin, or he said, someone else, stood up and said, O Messenger of Allah, buildings have been destroyed, and wealth has drowned. Pray to Allah, SVT, for us. The Messenger of Allah raised his hands and said, O Allah, around us and not on us. He did not point in any direction, but the clouds dispersed, until Al-Madinah became like a hole, and the valleys ran with water, and no one came from any direction, but he told us of the heavy rains. Grade Sahih.